So hello friends, my name is Nikhil, and today I am going to tell you a story which will make you think. So let's start. Los Angeles in the 1940s was a city overflowing with dreams. The bright lights of Hollywood attracted thousands of young men and women from across America. They arrived carrying suitcases full of hope, convinced that fame and fortune were just around the corner. Movie studios were producing glamorous films, celebrities were treated like royalty, and every aspiring actor believed they could become the next big star. Among those dreamers was a young woman named Elizabeth Short. At just 22 years old, Elizabeth possessed a striking appearance that made her stand out wherever she went. She had pale skin, captivating dark eyes, and jet black hair that contrasted sharply against her fair complexion. Friends often described her as charming, soft-spoken, and mysterious. She loved fashion and was frequently seen wearing elegant black clothing, a style that later contributed to the nickname that would make her infamous around the world. But beneath her glamorous appearance was a young woman struggling to find her place in life. Born in Boston and raised partly in Medford, her family's childhood had not been easy. Her parents faced financial hardships, and her parents' relationship eventually collapsed. Despite these difficulties, she never stopped dreaming of a better future. Like many young women of her generation, Elizabeth was captivated by Hollywood. She imagined herself walking through movie studio gates, landing acting roles, and seeing her name appear on theater marquees across America. Friends recalled how often she spoke about becoming an actress. Although she occasionally worked various jobs to support herself, her real ambition remained fixed on the entertainment industry. In the mid-1940s, she moved to Southern California, hoping that proximity to Hollywood would bring her closer to her dreams. Life in Los Angeles, however, was far more complicated than she had imagined. The city was crowded with talented people chasing the same opportunities. Competition was fierce, and success was elusive. Elizabeth spent time living in different apartments, staying with friends, and moving frequently. While she enjoyed socializing and was known to attract attention because of her beauty, she struggled to establish a stable career. Still, she refused to give up. Those who knew her remembered a young woman who maintained hope even when circumstances seemed bleak. She enjoyed visiting popular restaurants, meeting new people, and spending time in the city's bustling nightlife scene. She often told friends that her big break could come at any moment. No one knew that her life was rapidly approaching a tragic end. During the first week of January 1947, Elizabeth was seen in various parts of Los Angeles. She appeared to be going about her normal routine, meeting acquaintances and making plans for the future. Then came January 9th, 1947. That afternoon, Elizabeth was reportedly dropped off near the famous Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. The hotel was one of the city's most prestigious landmarks. Its grand architecture, elegant lobby, and wealthy clientele made it a gathering place for businessmen, celebrities, and travelers. Witnesses later reported seeing Elizabeth there, appearing calm and composed. No one noticed anything unusual. No one realized they were witnessing the last confirmed moments of her life. After arriving at the hotel, Elizabeth vanished. Hours passed, then days. Friends and acquaintances began noticing that nobody had heard from her. For a young woman who regularly interacted with others, the silence was unusual. Yet in a sprawling city like Los Angeles, people often disappeared from social circles for days at a time. At first, her absence did not trigger widespread concern. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city, a terrible crime was unfolding. The truth would remain hidden for nearly a week. Then, on the morning of January 15, 1947, everything changed. Around 10 a.m., a local resident named Betty Bersinger was walking through a neighborhood in Leimert Park with her young daughter. The area contained several vacant lots scattered among residential streets. As she walked past one of those lots, something in the grass caught her attention. At first glance, it appeared to be a discarded mannequin. The object was pale white and oddly positioned. Curious, she moved closer. Within seconds, she realized it was not a mannequin at all. It was a human body.
Horrified, she rushed away and contacted authorities. Police officers arriving at the scene encountered a sight so shocking that many would remember it for the rest of their lives. The victim was lying in an empty lot. The body had been deliberately positioned. The young woman had been cut into 2 sections at the waist. Her remains had been carefully arranged, with her hands placed above her head in a disturbing pose. Investigators immediately recognized that this was no ordinary homicide. The crime scene appeared calculated, organized, and chillingly deliberate. Veteran detectives who had investigated numerous murders throughout their careers were stunned by what they saw. Who could commit such a crime? Why had Elizabeth been targeted? And where had she spent the 6 days between her disappearance and the discovery of her body? As police began searching for answers, they had no idea that they were about to embark on one of the most famous and enduring murder investigations in American history. The mystery of the woman who would become known as the Black Dahlia had only just begun.
The discovery of Elizabeth Short's body sent shockwaves through Los Angeles. Within hours, police officers had sealed off the vacant lot, detectives were interviewing witnesses, and photographers were documenting every inch of the crime scene. News of the brutal killing spread rapidly across the city. At first, newspapers simply referred to the victim by her real name, but that would soon change. The American media of the 1940s was fiercely competitive. Newspapers constantly fought each other for exclusive stories, dramatic headlines, and shocking details that would boost sales. Reporters quickly realized that the murder of a young, attractive woman in Hollywood's backyard was exactly the kind of story that could capture the public's imagination. As journalists dug into Elizabeth's life, they learned about her distinctive appearance and her habit of wearing black clothing. Around the same time, a popular crime film called The Blue Dahlia was receiving widespread attention across America. Combining these elements, reporters created a nickname that would become permanently attached to Elizabeth's identity: the Black Dahlia. The name was dramatic, mysterious, and memorable. Almost overnight, Elizabeth ceased to be known simply as a young woman with Hollywood dreams. Instead, she became the central figure in a growing media phenomenon. The nickname appeared in newspapers across the country. Soon, millions of Americans were reading about the Black Dahlia every day. But as journalists competed for readers, more disturbing details about the crime began emerging. The murder itself was unlike anything most people had ever heard of. Detectives examining Elizabeth's remains discovered evidence that suggested the killer had spent considerable time with the victim before her body was abandoned. The crime appeared organized and deliberate, rather than impulsive. What shocked investigators most was the level of mutilation inflicted upon the victim. Among the most disturbing injuries was a series of deep cuts extending from the corners of her mouth across her cheeks. The wounds created a horrifying appearance that investigators immediately recognized as intentional. This type of mutilation is commonly referred to as a Glasgow smile, a term used to describe facial wounds that create an exaggerated grin-like appearance. For experienced detectives, the injury suggested something deeply unsettling. The killer had not merely wanted to take a life, he appeared determined to shock, terrify, and leave behind a lasting impression. As details leaked to the press, public fascination exploded. Every morning, crowds gathered around newsstands waiting for the latest developments. Newspaper vendors struggled to keep up with demand. People discussed the case at restaurants, workplaces, and family dinner tables. The Black Dahlia murder became the biggest crime story in America. Some newspapers printed dramatic illustrations. Others published maps of the crime scene. Many devoted entire front pages to speculation about the killer's identity. The public desperately wanted answers. Who was responsible? Was the murderer a doctor, a butcher, a psychopath, a Hollywood insider? Rumors spread faster than facts. Meanwhile, police departments across Los Angeles found themselves under enormous pressure. Hundreds of detectives were assigned to the investigation. Thousands of tips poured in from the public. People claimed to have seen suspicious strangers. Others reported mysterious vehicles. Some even confessed to the crime without any connection whatsoever. Each lead had to be investigated. Yet despite the massive effort, detectives remained frustratingly far from identifying the killer. Then, the case took an even stranger turn. Just when investigators were struggling to generate meaningful leads, someone began contacting the authorities. A few weeks after the murder, a package arrived at the offices of a local newspaper. The sender had taken extraordinary care to avoid leaving obvious evidence behind. Inside were personal items belonging to Elizabeth Short. The contents immediately stunned investigators. Among the materials were documents linked directly to Elizabeth's life, including her birth certificate and personal belongings that had never been recovered from the crime scene. The package appeared to be authentic. There was little doubt that whoever sent it had direct access to Elizabeth or her possessions. The message was chilling. The sender seemed to be taunting both the police and the media. Instead of hiding from investigators, the individual appeared eager to demonstrate control over the situation. Over the following days, additional communications surfaced. Letters allegedly connected to the killer began arriving. Some contained cryptic messages. Others appeared designed to mock law enforcement's inability to solve the crime. Each new letter generated enormous publicity. Newspapers published headlines announcing the latest developments. Citizens anxiously read every word. The possibility that the murderer was actively communicating with authorities transformed the investigation into a nationwide obsession. Then came another disturbing discovery. Among the items linked to the communications was an address book associated with Elizabeth's social circle. Detectives hoped it would provide valuable clues. Instead, it created even more questions. The book contained dozens of names, phone numbers, and contacts from various parts of Los Angeles. Every name became a potential lead. Every contact became a possible suspect. Investigators launched a massive effort to interview everyone connected to Elizabeth's life. The number of persons of interest continued to grow. Yet no matter how many interviews were conducted, the identity of the killer remained hidden. As weeks passed, the investigation expanded into one of the largest murder inquiries in American history. The media frenzy showed no signs of slowing down. The public remained captivated. And somewhere in Los Angeles, the person responsible for one of the most infamous murders ever committed appeared to be watching the chaos unfolding, seemingly enjoying every moment of it. The mystery of the Black Dahlia was becoming darker, stranger, and far more complicated than anyone had imagined.
As the weeks turned into months, the investigation into Elizabeth Short's murder grew into one of the largest criminal inquiries in American history. The pressure on the Los Angeles Police Department was immense. Every day, newspapers demanded answers. Citizens flooded police stations with tips. Politicians wanted results. Detectives worked around the clock, chasing every possible lead that might identify the person responsible for the horrifying crime. Yet, despite their efforts, the case seemed to move further away from a solution. By the end of 1947, investigators had examined an astonishing number of potential suspects. The list included doctors, aspiring actors, nightclub owners, gamblers, drifters, ex-soldiers, criminals, and even individuals who voluntarily walked into police stations claiming responsibility for the murder. Some confessions appeared convincing at first. A few suspects possessed violent histories. Others seemed to know details about the crime that had not been widely reported. But every lead eventually collapsed under scrutiny. Alibis were confirmed. Evidence failed to connect suspects to the murder scene. Witness statements contradicted one another. Again and again, detectives found themselves back at the beginning. In total, more than 150 individuals were seriously investigated over the years. Not one led to an arrest. The killer remained a ghost. One of the greatest obstacles facing investigators was the era itself. Today, detectives have access to sophisticated forensic technologies. DNA analysis can identify a suspect from microscopic traces left at a crime scene. Security cameras monitor entire cities. Digital records can reconstruct a person's movements with remarkable accuracy. None of that existed in 1947. Investigators were operating with tools that now seem primitive. Fingerprints were among the most powerful forms of evidence available, but only if usable prints could be recovered and matched to someone already in police records. Witness testimony was another crucial investigative tool. Unfortunately, witnesses are human. Memories fade. People make mistakes. Rumors influence recollections.
In the Black Dahlia case, the flood of media coverage created even more confusion. Thousands of people believed they had seen Elizabeth in her final days. Many reports directly contradicted one another. Detectives struggled to separate fact from fiction. Meanwhile, the killer appeared to have planned the crime with extraordinary care. There were few obvious clues, no reliable eyewitnesses, no murder weapon, no direct evidence pointing to a specific individual. The more investigators examined the crime, the more they became convinced that the person responsible was intelligent, organized, and experienced. This belief led many detectives toward a particular theory. The condition of Elizabeth's body suggested a level of anatomical knowledge that seemed unusual. The separation of the body appeared deliberate and precise. The cuts displayed a degree of control that some investigators believed would be difficult for an untrained individual to achieve. As a result, rumors began circulating inside law enforcement circles. Could the killer have been a doctor, a surgeon, a medical student, someone who worked in a hospital or mortuary? The theory gained popularity because it appeared to explain several aspects of the crime. Some detectives believed the offender understood human anatomy far better than the average person. Others argued that the killer may have possessed professional training that allowed him to commit the crime efficiently. However, there was a major problem. No evidence conclusively proved the theory. While the precision of certain injuries raised questions, investigators could never establish beyond doubt that the murderer had formal medical training. The idea remained a possibility rather than a fact. As years passed, another tragedy unfolded. The real Elizabeth Short slowly began disappearing beneath layers of myth and speculation. The media had transformed her into a national symbol. Writers, filmmakers, and journalists became fascinated by the mystery. Books were published, magazine articles appeared. Hollywood producers explored adaptations of the story. Unfortunately, many of these accounts focused more on creating drama than preserving historical accuracy. New rumors emerged about Elizabeth's personal life. Some portrayed her as a glamorous socialite moving through Hollywood's elite circles. Others described her as a troubled woman involved in dangerous relationships and secret activities. The stories became increasingly sensational. With each retelling, the line between fact and fiction blurred. Yet when historians later examined surviving records, interviews, and official documents, a different picture emerged. Rather than the mysterious femme fatale often depicted in popular culture, Elizabeth appeared to be a fairly ordinary young woman struggling to build a future for herself. She had dreams, she had friends, she experienced the same hopes and disappointments faced by countless young people seeking opportunity in Los Angeles. The mythology surrounding the Black Dahlia often overshadowed the person she truly was. Meanwhile, the investigation continued to generate new suspects. Every few years, someone would claim to have solved the case. A retired detective would name a suspect. A journalist would uncover a new theory. A family member would accuse a deceased relative. Books appeared claiming to reveal the killer's identity once and for all. Yet none of these theories produced enough evidence to close the case officially. Decades passed. Detectives retired. Witnesses died. Physical evidence deteriorated. The mystery only deepened. What had begun as a murder investigation was slowly becoming one of the most famous unsolved crimes in history. And despite years of investigation, hundreds of interviews, and countless theories, the central question remained exactly where it had been on that cold January morning in 1947. Who killed Elizabeth Short? No one knew, and perhaps no one ever would.
As the 1940s faded into the 1950s and the 1950s into the 1960s, the investigation into the murder of Elizabeth Short gradually lost momentum. The intense media frenzy that had once dominated front pages across America began to fade. New crimes captured public attention. New scandals replaced old mysteries. But the Black Dahlia case never truly disappeared. Instead, it transformed from an active murder investigation into something much larger, a cultural obsession. For years, detectives continued to review old files, interview witnesses, and pursue occasional leads.
Yet no suspect could be linked to the crime with enough evidence to justify prosecution. The case remained unsolved. Then, decades later, a shocking accusation reignited worldwide interest. A former LAPD detective named Steve Hodel came forward with a theory that stunned both law enforcement and the public. He claimed that the killer was his own father, George Hodel. It was an extraordinary allegation. Steve Hodel had spent years studying old police files, photographs, witness statements, and family records. The deeper he investigated, the more convinced he became that his father was responsible for Elizabeth Short's murder. George Hodel was not an ordinary suspect. He was a highly educated physician living in Los Angeles during the period when the murder occurred. He moved within influential social circles and was known for his intelligence, charisma, and unconventional lifestyle. According to Steve Hodel, several factors made his father a compelling suspect. One of the most discussed points was George Hodel's medical background. Many investigators had long believed that the killer possessed advanced anatomical knowledge because of the manner in which Elizabeth's body had been mutilated and positioned. As a physician, George Hodel certainly had the kind of training that could potentially explain the precision that detectives observed. Steve Hodel also pointed to old police records that suggested his father had attracted law enforcement attention during the original investigation. Perhaps most controversially, he cited secretly recorded conversations collected by police surveillance teams in the early 1950s. In one widely discussed transcript, George Hodel allegedly made statements that some interpreted as suspicious. Supporters of Steve Hodel's theory viewed these details as powerful evidence. Critics, however, remained unconvinced. Many experts argued that the evidence was largely circumstantial. They noted that suspicion alone could not establish guilt, and that no definitive forensic proof linked George Hodel to the murder. As a result, the debate continues even today. Some people consider George Hodel the most likely suspect. Others believe the evidence falls far short of solving the case. The mystery remains unresolved. At the same time, another theory gained traction among historians and true crime researchers. Some argued that the original investigation may have been compromised by corruption inside the Los Angeles police system. During the mid-20th century, Los Angeles was a city where politics, business interests, organized crime figures, and powerful social elites often operated in overlapping circles. Rumors persisted that certain individuals enjoyed protection because of their wealth, influence, or connections. According to this theory, if the killer belonged to a powerful social network, investigators might have faced obstacles that prevented them from pursuing certain leads aggressively. Some researchers pointed to missing reports, conflicting accounts, and questionable decisions made during the investigation. Others argued that these issues were simply the result of poor record-keeping and the limitations of policing in the 1940s. The truth remains uncertain. No conclusive evidence has ever emerged proving that corruption directly prevented the case from being solved, yet the possibility has continued to fuel speculation for decades. As theories multiplied, Elizabeth Short's murder evolved into something more than a criminal investigation. It became a symbol. Writers, filmmakers, and artists increasingly viewed the Black Dahlia case as the ultimate representation of Hollywood's darker side. The glamorous image of Los Angeles promoted around the world showed movie stars, luxury cars, elegant mansions, and dreams coming true. The Black Dahlia story revealed something very different. It exposed a city where ambition could lead to exploitation, where fame was pursued by thousands but achieved by very few, where loneliness, disappointment, and danger often existed behind the glittering facade. This contrast helped transform Elizabeth's story into the central part of American noir culture. The word noir describes stories filled with mystery, moral ambiguity, corruption, and hidden darkness lurking beneath seemingly glamorous environments. Few real-life crimes fit that description more perfectly than the Black Dahlia case. A young woman arrives in Hollywood chasing dreams. She disappears. Her murder shocks the nation. The killer vanishes. The mystery survives for generations. It felt less like reality and more like the plot of a dark detective novel. As the decades passed, countless books, documentaries, television programs, and films revisited the case. Each generation discovered the mystery anew. Each generation proposed its own suspect. Each generation believed it might finally uncover the truth. Yet the passage of time created new challenges. The detectives who had worked the original investigation began to retire. Witnesses aged, memories faded. Many individuals connected to the case passed away. Even more troubling was the gradual disappearance of physical evidence. Storage practices in the mid-20th century were far different from modern standards. Some records were misplaced, others deteriorated with age. Certain pieces of evidence were reportedly destroyed during routine archival procedures long before anyone imagined future forensic technologies might exist. What remained was only a fraction of the original case file. By the end of the 20th century, the chances of solving the Black Dahlia murder had become increasingly remote. The trail had grown cold, the suspects were dead or elderly, the evidence was incomplete, and the people who knew the most about the investigation were gone. Yet despite all these obstacles, the mystery refused to die. Because somewhere within the missing documents, fading memories, and forgotten clues might still lie the answer to one of America's most haunting questions. What really happened to Elizabeth Short? And who ensured that her killer would remain hidden for generations?
As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, many believed that the Black Dahlia case would eventually fade into history. After all, the crime had occurred in 1947. The principal witnesses were gone. The original detectives had long since retired or passed away. Physical evidence had been lost, destroyed, or degraded by time. And yet somehow the mystery endured. In fact, the arrival of the digital age breathed new life into the investigation. The internet connected researchers from around the world, allowing thousands of people to examine the case in ways that had never been possible before. Professional historians, retired detectives, journalists, and amateur sleuths began collaborating online. Old newspaper archives were digitized. Historical photographs became available to the public. Government records that had once been difficult to access could now be searched from a home computer. For the first time, ordinary people could study the Black Dahlia case almost as extensively as professional investigators. Online communities emerged, dedicated entirely to solving the mystery. Members compared witness statements. They examined maps of 1940s Los Angeles. They traced Elizabeth Short's known movements during the final days before her disappearance. Some researchers even reconstructed entire neighborhoods using historical records, attempting to understand where she had traveled and whom she might have encountered during the final hours of her life. Every few years, a new theory would gain attention. Someone would identify a forgotten suspect. A previously overlooked document would surface. A researcher would uncover an old photograph or police report that appeared to offer a fresh clue. For a brief moment, hope would return. Perhaps this was the breakthrough. Perhaps the mystery was finally about to be solved. But each time, the trail would eventually run cold. The answers remained just out of reach. And that is what continues to make the Black Dahlia case so haunting. Because beneath all the theories, suspects, books, and documentaries lies a heartbreaking reality. At the center of this famous mystery was not a legend, not a myth, not a fictional character. There was only a young woman named Elizabeth Short. She was 22 years old. She had dreams of building a future in Hollywood. She hoped to find success, independence, and opportunity in a city that promised all three. Like countless young people before her and after her, she arrived in Los Angeles believing that hard work and determination might one day lead to something better. Instead, her life ended in circumstances that remain unexplained nearly 8 decades later. No one was ever convicted. No one was ever held legally accountable. The person responsible for her murder disappeared into history.
For Elizabeth's family, the lack of justice was a wound that never fully healed. Years turned into decades, decades turned into generations, yet the most important question remained unanswered. Why? Why was Elizabeth targeted? What happened during the missing days before her body was discovered? Who committed the crime? The silence surrounding those questions has become part of the tragedy itself. As public fascination continued, the story inevitably entered popular culture. Authors, filmmakers, and screenwriters found themselves drawn to the mystery. Among the most influential interpretations was The Black Dahlia by James Ellroy. The novel transformed the case into a dark and atmospheric work of crime fiction, introducing the Black Dahlia story to a new generation of readers. Although fictionalized, the book played a major role in cementing the case within modern popular culture. Soon, Elizabeth Short's story became inseparable from the mythology of Hollywood itself. The Black Dahlia came to represent something larger than a single unsolved crime. She became a symbol of the darker side of the American dream. Hollywood was often portrayed as a place where dreams came true, a city of movie stars, luxury, glamour, and endless opportunity. But the Black Dahlia case revealed another side of that dream, a side filled with loneliness, disappointment, exploitation, and danger lurking beneath the bright lights. That contrast continues to fascinate people even today. More than 79 years after Elizabeth Short's murder, the Black Dahlia case remains one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in the world. Investigators have come and gone. Suspects have been named and dismissed. Books have been written. Films have been produced. Entire careers have been devoted to solving the puzzle. Yet the mystery survives. Many true crime researchers refer to it as the holy grail of unsolved murder cases, a case so famous, so complex, and so elusive that solving it would be considered one of the greatest achievements in criminal investigation. Whether the truth will ever be discovered remains uncertain. Perhaps a forgotten document still sits in an archive somewhere. Perhaps a crucial clue vanished decades ago. Or perhaps the identity of the killer died with the person who committed the crime. No one knows. What is known is that the story of Elizabeth Short continues to resonate because it is ultimately about more than a murder. It is about a young woman who arrived in Hollywood with hope in her heart and dreams for the future. It is about a crime that shocked a nation, and it is about a mystery that, despite the passage of nearly 8 decades, refuses to let go of the world's imagination. The Black Dahlia case remains a chilling reminder that some secrets can survive generations, hidden in the shadows long after everyone involved has disappeared. And with this, our story ends. If you like the story, then like it and subscribe to hear more such stories.